All right, so we're diving into a story that I think we can all agree is both captivating and controversial. The Tale of Marie Antoinette. Now, you requested this deep dive, so you probably already know she's practically, synonymous with the French Revolution. But her story goes so much deeper than the let them eat cake soundbite.
Right.
Today, we're going to separate fact from fiction. We'll use your source material, which are excerpts from an article focusing on her life and execution, to get a clearer picture of Marie Antoinette and really try to understand her role in one of history's most tumultuous periods, wouldn't you say?
It's a common misconception that she single-handedly brought down the French monarchy.
Right.
The reality is far more nuanced.
Absolutely. It's like trying to understand a hurricane by focusing on a single raindrop.
Yeah.
So let's set the stage.
Yeah.
We're talking about France in the late 1700s, a time of incredible inequality. The monarchy seemed utterly detached from the struggles of everyday people. And the seeds of revolution were already being sown at this point.
And into this powder keg walks a 14-year-old Marie Antoinette,
Wow.
sent from Austria to marry the future King Louis XVI. Just imagine that. A teenager, essentially a pawn in a high-stakes political game, suddenly becoming the face of a monarchy teetering on the brink of collapse.
14. That's younger than most of us were when we got our driver's licenses.
Yeah.
It's hard to fathom the pressure and scrutiny she must have faced from the moment she arrived at the French court.
Especially considering that royal marriages back then were rarely, if ever, about love.
Right.
It was all about forging alliances and maintaining power. Marie Antoinette's union was meant to solidify the bond between Austria and France, but it also placed her directly in the line of fire as resentment towards the monarchy grew.
It's interesting because the source mentions that she was initially quite popular. People were charmed by her beauty and her grace. Was she destined to fail from the very beginning? Was there anything she could have done to bridge this enormous gap between the monarchy and the people?
Well, it's a question that historians continue to debate, you know? Some argue that the French monarchy was already too far gone, too deeply entrenched in its own privilege to truly understand the plight of its people. Others suggest that Marie Antoinette, despite her good intentions, became a symbol of everything the French people had come to resent: excess, extravagance, and a complete disconnect from the realities of daily life.
Speaking of extravagance, we can't ignore the nickname that really stuck with her, Madame Deficit. It perfectly captures the public sentiment, doesn't it?
It does, and it highlights a crucial point. France's economic woes played a huge role in fueling the revolution.
Oh, absolutely.
Decades of lavish spending by the aristocracy, coupled with costly wars, had drained the treasury.
Right.
While it's unfair to place all the blame on Marie Antoinette, her extravagant lifestyle,
Of course.
think lavish balls, elaborate hairstyles, a wardrobe that would make a modern-day fashion icon blush made her an easy target for public anger.
Yeah.
It's worth noting that, compared to some other European monarchs at the time, her spending wasn't actually that out of line.
Oh, interesting.
But perception often trumps reality, especially during times of widespread hardship.
So the stage is set. We have a deeply unpopular monarchy, a struggling populace, and a queen who, fairly or not, becomes a symbol of everything wrong with the system. And then in 1789, the simmering tensions erupt with the storming of the Bastille. This event, I imagine, was absolutely pivotal.
It was a true turning point.
Yeah.
The Bastille, a royal prison, represented the king's absolute authority. When the people stormed it, seizing weapons and freeing prisoners, they sent a resounding message. The old order was crumbling and a new era was dawning.
Wow.
It was a violent and chaotic affair,
Yeah.
but it also demonstrated the collective power of the people, something that would define the course of the revolution.
With the revolution in full swing, Marie Antoinette and the royal family found themselves in an increasingly precarious position. Their attempt to flee France in 1791, the so-called flight to Varennes, seems almost inevitable in hindsight, wouldn't you say?
It was a desperate gamble, and one that ultimately backfired spectacularly.
Yeah.
You see, prior to the escape attempt, the public's perception of the royal family, while negative,
Right.
hadn't fully solidified into outright hostility.
Okay.
Many saw them as out of touch, but not necessarily malicious. The flight to Varennes, however, changed everything.
Oh, wow.
It confirmed the public's worst fears, that the monarchy was more loyal to foreign powers than to its own people.
So this attempted escape, instead of offering them a chance at freedom, actually sealed their fate.
Precisely.
Why?
It transformed them from out-of-touch figureheads into perceived traitors in the eyes of the revolutionaries.
Right.
And with that shift in perception, the stage was set for the tragic events that would follow. The situation just became, untenable for the royal family, leading them to make that fateful decision to try and escape. This ultimately led to their capture and the execution of Louis XVI in 1793. And from that point onward, Marie Antoinette's fate was essentially sealed.
Yeah, it's almost Shakespearean, isn't it? This rapid decline from the heights of power to imprisonment and ultimately death. And speaking of Shakespearean drama, the source mentions a particularly shocking accusation that was leveled against Marie Antoinette during her trial.
Oh, yes. The accusations against her were numerous, ranging from treason, conspiracy with foreign powers, to the utterly abhorrent charge of incest with her own son.
Oh, my goodness.
It's important to remember that this was the height of the Reign of Terror,
Right.
a period marked by paranoia, political purges, and summary executions. The Revolutionary Tribunal was less a court of law and more a tool for eliminating anyone perceived as a threat to the revolution.
So in essence, her trial was a sham, designed to deliver a predetermined guilty verdict. It's a chilling reminder of how easily justice can be perverted during times of extreme political upheaval. But before we get to the execution itself, I'm curious, what was the atmosphere like during the trial? Was there any sense of fairness? Or was it just a foregone conclusion from the start?
Well, the atmosphere was one of intense fear and suspicion. The Reign of Terror was a period where people lived in constant dread of being accused, denounced, and sent to the guillotine. The trials were often rushed, lacked any semblance of due process. The accusations against Marie Antoinette, particularly the one regarding her son, were clearly fabricated, designed to dehumanize her and stir up public hatred. They highlight the dangerous power of propaganda and the way in which truth can be twisted and manipulated to serve political ends.
It's horrifying, but also incredibly relevant even today,
Oh, yeah.
We see how easily misinformation, disinformation can spread, particularly in our digital age. So knowing that the trial was basically a kangaroo court, what was Marie Antoinette's demeanor like in those final days? Did she fight back? Or did she just resign herself to her fate?
Well, what's fascinating here is that despite the horrific circumstances, the sources describe her as maintaining a remarkable level of composure and dignity. She refused to play the role of the hysterical, desperate queen that her accusers wanted her to be. Instead, she faced her trial with a quiet strength, perhaps knowing that her fate was sealed, but determined to retain a semblance of control in the face of her own demise.
And then comes the execution itself, October 16th, 1793. The source paints a stark picture of that day. Can you walk us through those final moments?
Imagine this. Marie Antoinette is taken through the streets of Paris in an open cart, not in the fine clothes and jewels one might associate with a queen, but in a simple white chemise. The contrast is striking and deliberate, meant to symbolize her fall from grace and strip her of any remaining vestiges of royal authority.
It's a powerful image. The woman who was once synonymous with opulence and extravagance is now reduced to the most basic of garments. It's almost as if they were trying to erase her former identity to make her just another nameless victim of the revolution.
Exactly. And yet, even in this moment of utter humiliation, there's a detail that reveals her humanity. As she's ascending the scaffold, she accidentally steps on the executioner's foot and apologizes.
Wow, a simple apology, but in that context, it speaks volumes. In that moment, she's not a queen, she's not a symbol of a hated regime, she's just a human being facing her death with an unexpected grace.
It's a poignant reminder that even in the most extreme circumstances, basic human decency can still shine through. It challenges the one-dimensional caricature of Marie Antoinette that had been propagated by the revolutionaries.
So she's executed, and the crowd cheers. The revolution marches on. But as you mentioned earlier, history isn't always black and white. How have perceptions of Marie Antoinette changed over time? Is she still seen as this villainous figure, or is there more to the story?
That's where things get really interesting. Over the years, historians have started to peel back the layers of propaganda
Right.
and examine her life with more nuance.
Okay, so let's talk about that propaganda. Because even today, when people think of Marie Antoinette, they often think of that famous quote, "Let them eat cake." Did she really say that?
Probably not.
There's no actual evidence that she ever uttered those words. It's likely a fabrication spread by her enemies to portray her as callous and out of touch with the struggles of the common people?
It's amazing how a single quote, even a fake one, can have such a lasting impact on someone's reputation.
It speaks to the power of storytelling and how easily narratives can be shaped and manipulated, especially during times of political turmoil. We see echoes of this even today, don't we?
Oh, yeah.
In the way that information and misinformation can spread like wildfire in our digital age.
Absolutely. It makes you wonder how someone like Marie Antoinette would have navigated the complexities of our modern world with its 24/7 news cycle and social media scrutiny.
It's a fascinating thought experiment. Imagine Marie Antoinette with an Instagram account sharing glimpses of her life at court, her fashion choices, her charitable works.
She would have been an influencer for sure. But could she have countered the negative press, the rumors, the outright lies that were being spread about her?
It's tough to say, really.
On the one hand, social media can give individuals a platform to speak directly to the public,
Right.
to bypass traditional gatekeepers and control their own narratives, at least to some extent.
True, but it's a double-edged sword, right? I mean, anything she posted could be taken out of context, twisted, and used against her.
Exactly.
We've seen that happen countless times, even with the most carefully crafted messages.
And the court of public opinion on social media can be just as swift and unforgiving as any revolutionary tribunal, if not more so.
Oh, absolutely. While she might have been able to humanize herself and connect with some people on a more personal level, the constant scrutiny and potential for backlash could have easily overshadowed any positive efforts.
Yeah, it's hard to know for sure.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How would someone like Marie Antoinette navigate the complexities of our modern world, with all its technological advancement and ever-shifting social dynamics?
It's a fascinating question to ponder. And it's a testament to the enduring power of her story that we're still debating these issues centuries later.
For sure.
She was a product of her time, thrust into a role she was ill-prepared for, and ultimately became a scapegoat for a system that was already crumbling.
If we strip away the myths, the propaganda, what are we left with? Who was the real Marie Antoinette?
Well, she was a complex human being, a young woman who experienced both incredible privilege and unimaginable suffering.
Yeah.
She made mistakes, certainly, but she also demonstrated resilience and courage in the face of extraordinary adversity.
So what does this all mean for us today? Why should we care about Marie Antoinette centuries after her death?
I think her story offers us valuable insights into human nature, the dangers of unchecked power, and the fragility of reputation. It reminds us that history is never simple, and that even the most vilified figures deserve a second look.
You've made a really compelling case for that. It's easy to get caught up in the historical caricature of Marie Antoinette, but when you delve deeper, you discover a much more nuanced and ultimately tragic figure.
Exactly. And it challenges us to think critically about the narratives we encounter, both historical and contemporary, to question assumptions, to seek out multiple perspectives, and to recognize that even in the midst of great turmoil, there are always shades of gray.
To our listener, I encourage you to keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep drawing your own conclusions about Marie Antoinette and the world she inhabited.
Because the more we learn about the past, the better equipped we are to understand the present and navigate the future.
And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder those big questions. Until next time, keep diving deep.